After a while, Mrs. Oldknow continued, things began to go wrong, things that no one could explain. Dogs howled in the yards and were found dead in the morning. Cottages that used at night to show a friendly lighted room to the village street were now shuttered close after dark. The men went to the taverns more than usual, but waited for company on the way home. On such a night as tonight, Dr. Vogel had been seen gathering herbs or moths or snakes on the big water meadows. He was not alone. You couldn't rightly tell what it was. It could have been a white hare, larger than life. It ran in circles, it danced upright and made sudden swoops. Gradually the stories got worse. It was said that a man all muffled up in a hood had come to a poor woman whose baby had been stillborn and had tried to buy its body for a piece of gold. Everybody knew dead bodies were needed for black magic, for the worst kind. It was a very hot summer. Cooped indoors with his tutor, Roger's illness became noticeably worse. His parents thought that perhaps the discipline was too severe, and they asked Dr. Vogel to spare the boy and remember he was an invalid. This resulted in the doctor taking a new interest, very unwelcome to Roger, an over-kindness that compressed his little red mouth into a parody of an old maid's. Sometimes he would lean in mock fatherliness on Roger's shoulder as he was bent over his writing, and then give a sharp shove as if to test how much resistance there was in the boy. This generally brought on a fit of desperate coughing. "None too good, my poor boy, none too good," he would say as he went back to his place, rubbing his hands nervously. "None too good, is he added to no one who was there. Roger was clearly getting worse every week. He was thin, with a high feverish color, and too excitable. He implored his mother with tears to take him away from Dr. Vogel. His parents thought it was hysteria due to his illness. They saw no reason for him to be frightened, but then they never saw what Dr. Vogel did when they were not there, nor how his rolling eyes suddenly focused on poor Roger with an impatient glee, as if to say, "It won't be long now." The servants said another dead body was wanted. However, Roger's terror at last reached such a pitch that his parents took him away to stay with his grandmother in Devon, hoping the change of air would do him good. She was glad to have him and pleaded for him to be left with her. His mother and father took the long journey home without him. They had been away a month. Such journeys were not lightly undertaken. And when they set out, there had been no intention of leaving Roger behind, in which case Dr. Vogel could have been told his duties were over, though it might have been difficult to get rid of him. On their return, they found Green Knowe in confusion. Dr. Vogel had disappeared, leaving all his possessions behind, except his books, as you shall hear. A week after Roger had been taken away, Dr. Vogel sent word to Piers Madeley to come to him urgently and not let anything stand in the way for the love of God. Piers Madeley was afraid of Dr. Vogel for every reason. He made him feel a nobody, ill-born, poor, stupid, provincial, and unwanted. Yet Piers had a strong feeling that the scholar, though terrifying, was a hollow man. The wording of the message was such that a parish priest could not ignore. So, although it was infinitely against his inclination, he went to Green Knowe. He found Dr. Vogel in a lamentable state, hardly recognizable. He had had no sleep for nights on end. He was unbrushed, and his clothes were torn as if from a fight. He said he wished to make a confession, and as he stammered it out, he behaved as if the room were full of threatening enemies, instead of containing just the two of them and the door locked. What the doctor confessed has, of course, never been told, but Piers afterward told the bishop that the sweat poured off of him even as he listened. When he had heard it, he urgently besought Dr. Vogel to burn his books and certain of his belongings. At first the unhappy man refused. His books were worth a fortune. They were also the foundation of his career, his future, and his hopes of making gold. To burn them was like burning himself. But later, looking round him with a face of terror, he gave a great cry and said, "Yes, and quickly." The books were upstairs indoors, and the furnace in the vault, so to save time in carrying, they made a bonfire in the courtyard. They had to work like devils to collect all that had to be burnt. Dr. Vogel repeatedly cried out, "Make haste before the moon rises," and he poured pitch and tallow into the fire. It went up like a beacon. The servants watched in terror, peeping through the windows and keeping well out of the way. If you have ever tried to burn a book, you will know that it is difficult. The pages remain in a solid block and will not catch. Once Dr. Vogel saw in the firelight a book lying open and unburned, showing a page of intricate diagrams, and he let out a scream and pitchforked it into the heart of the flames. Finally, there was nothing but a glowing mass. The doctor sank exhausted on the threshold of the vault, his head in his hands. Piers managed to say a compassionate, "Now peace be with you as your trust is in God." And puffing painfully and mopping his brow, he prepared to set off home. "Alas," groaned Dr. Vogel, pointing at the smoldering books, and looking not less woeful because his exhausted eyes were straying separately. "What's thought cannot be unthought." The rim of the moon was just rising above the trees when Piers left. It was a strange, sultry color seen through the earth mists, and opposite it, in the heart of the night, the crimson smoke of the bonfire went straight up like a signal. The shadows on the footpath felt to Piers almost solid. He zigzagged to avoid them, feeling his way through a gathering invisible crowd. He said his prayers aloud as he went. 2 hours later, chiding himself for his shaking knees and lack of faith, he opened his bedroom window and looked out. The moon was high, the night soundless. He listened, turning his ear toward Green Knowe across the meadows. Then he heard a scream. He knew it was a man, but it was so high and throbbing that it might have been a terrified horse. Nothing more was ever heard of Dr. Vogel. There was a pause while the boys fidgeted and the moon shone coldly. "I'm glad he's gone," said Tolly, rubbing his shin with the side of the other foot. "I hope he hasn't left anything behind." "I don't much like the idea what's thought cannot be unthought," said Ping. Mrs. Oldknow looked at them and laughed at their nervousness. "Do you two feel any readier to go to sleep now? It's time to go in." "Oh," they said, standing close together. The entrance hall was delightfully enclosing and reassuring, full as always of flowers and birds' nests. The lights were relayed from mirror to mirror, all down its length, and all the scatter of happy living, secateurs, baskets, books, letters, and anything to hand, was lying on the tables. The painted stairs led up invitingly, but to get to the attic you had to pass through the knight's hall, which, if it had been alone for some hours, had a habit of slipping back to its own century. However much you loved it, Tolly thought, it always needed a little resolution to break into its privacy at night. "You didn't tell us anything about the witch ball," he reminded Mrs. Oldknow, to postpone the moment. "May we see it, please?" The witch ball was hanging from the middle beam of the room nearest the front door. It was made of looking glass and had a diameter of about 18 inches. The glass was old, and the silvering was old. It did not glitter like modern glass, but reflected in an almost velvety way. Being round, what it reflected was a spherical room, something difficult to look at because impossible to imagine. There were no straight lines at all, no right angles. Floor, ceiling, doors, windows, tables, and chairs all curved softly round its shape. Ping and Tolly, standing underneath, looking up at it, appeared to be diving out of it face first, their bodies foreshortened and tapering like tadpoles. "You see," said Mrs. Oldknow, "it reflects everything, even what is behind it, though that for some reason is upside down, which is supposed to be how our eyes really see things." "What is it used for, Granny? Is it for seeing the future?" "It looks as though it should be. You could easily see strange things in a spherical mirror room where even ordinary things look so queer. Something could be there for quite a long time before you noticed it. Besides, it's always easier to see visions in a glass than in reality. But I believe it was supposed to keep away demons. I don't know why. Perhaps because if anyone had an attendant demon and came anywhere near the witch ball, they would risk the demon being seen. You must admit it looks magic enough for anything." "You would have to learn how to look into it," said Tolly sensibly. "It is difficult to recognize things in it, especially upside down." "A demon, if there was one," said Ping, "wouldn't like being reflected, even if no one saw. It might steal some of his power." I'm sure that's right, Ping, said the old lady, unlike ghosts who want to be seen and use looking glasses to do it. I suppose that is why you have so many glasses in the hall, said Tolly. I like the house ghosts too, but I think I would be happier tonight if the witch ball was hanging up in our bedroom. May we take it up? I don't want any of Dr. Vogel's companions clutching at me. Mrs. Oldknow laughed. Don't tell me you have sold your soul so young. I am counting on you to be one of the stalwart guardians of the place. You should be clutching demons by the tail, not they you. Green Knowe doesn't need guardians, said Tolly, showing in his face how proud he was of it. It can't have any enemies. It has enemies, and it needs guarding all the time, said the old lady, in spite of all the preservation societies. It wouldn't be there another 5 years if we stopped watching and guarding it. The very fact that it has lasted so long makes some people impatient. Time it went, they say, without further argument. The fact that it is different from anywhere else, with memories and standards of its own, makes quite a lot of people very angry indeed. Things have no right to be different. Everything should be alike, over and above all the rest. It seems to me to have something I can't put a name to, which always has had enemies. Lift the witch ball down, Tolly. We'll take it up to the attic. It is wasted in my workroom. It really is a beauty. They carried it carefully upstairs and hung it from a beam. It was a great addition. It reflected both Ping and Tolly in their beds, though even when they sat up and waved their arms, it was difficult to find themselves in it. One is not used to seeing one's self feet upwards. At breakfast the next morning, as they sat discussing what they should do on their first day, the post arrived with a letter for Mrs. Oldknow. Tolly watched her read it because he knew that she either smiled with all her wrinkles if it was from someone she liked, or tut-tutted like an annoyed wren if it was tiresome. This time she tutted and laughed. Here's someone who is going to waste her time and ours. Listen, it's from Dr. Melanie D. Powers, Doctor of Philosophy of Geneva. Dear Mrs. Oldknow, I have been commissioned to write a book about English private libraries in the 17th century. I am also acting on behalf of the Library of the Philosophical Society of Jerusalem, who are anxious to obtain certain very rare old manuscripts. One of them is thought to have been in the collection of Dr. Wolfgang Vogel, who inhabited Green Knowe from 1630 until his death the following year. There is no record of what happened to his books after that date. It seems possible that some are still in your house. If so, and if you are willing to part with them, I am authorized by the Philosophical Society to arrange the price with you. As I am in the neighborhood, I will call tomorrow about 4 o'clock and hope it will not be inconvenient to you. Perhaps you will be kind enough to let me see your very interesting house. Yours sincerely, Melanie D. Powers. If she had bothered to look it up in the rolls, said the old lady, she would have known the books were burnt. Piers Madeley's evidence was taken down before the magistrates when inquiries were being made about Dr. Vogel's disappearance, because other scholars wanted his books, and it was not known for certain that he was dead. However, we will let Miss Powers come. She can get some local color for her account of Dr. Vogel. There you are, Ping, Tolly exclaimed. Didn't I tell you parts of grand stories always come true? She no sooner mentions Dr. Wolfgang Vogel than Dr. Melanie D. Powers comes asking about him. I wonder if she has a roving eye. Or a horrible long first finger. Tolly then wanted to know whose the witch ball was and how it came to be there. If it was there when Dr. Vogel was in the house, it didn't seem to have done much